Yeah, that's
Exactly.
pretty great. That's
And the number, when you see the number of viewers on Facebook, I think that's only reflective of the people who are actually watching on phones and tablets. I don't think that reflects the number of people watching on web browsers on a laptop, but I'm not sure about that. I think it somehow gets
mhm.
calculated differently.
Okay. So as soon as we have the broadcast on YouTube, we will start.
It says we're going on YouTube.
Does
On my screen, it says we're live on YouTube now.
usually when it starts, I get an echo from the page that it's uh, broadcasting about 2 seconds after the actual words come out of your mouth. But I'm
You
not.
might have that sound
It's
turned down.
funny. It came up on my screen, but without an echo or anything.
Yeah. No, it's echo because he's got the two sound sources there.
All right. Okay. I guess we are broadcasting. Charlie, can you confirm that or?
Uh, yeah, just go ahead and I'll make sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I doubt Zoom is lying. It says live on YouTube in the upper left on my screen on Zoom.
Yeah, we are.
Okay. Zoom does not lie. Zoom might censor, but it does not lie. Truth, truth is what we deal in here at Community Church. We hope.
Just go ahead.
Here we are, and we're going to start. We've got.
Zoom is lying. It says.
No, I gotta go back to Zoom.
Good morning, Homer.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Jose, Charlie, Barry, Kevin, a few phone numbers, Susan, Tobias. It's good to see you all. The early risers, as usual, community churches like this assemblage of stragglers that come in whenever they feel like it. Sometimes people that don't want to hear the early churchy stuff and that want to hear the meat. But we're going to start with some meat or tofu if you're a vegetarian, because we have David ROVICS, and I can't tell you what an honor and a pleasure it is. David is one of 4 or 5 performers who, when in town, Community Church drops everything to host David, no matter what day of the week it is, and this is no exception. We have David online, and we're going to start, David, with a song. And first, I want to just say that I just admire the way David has grasped this new virtual reality that we're living in to do really amazing things and become just an incredibly serious broadcaster, and to transmit his music on all manner of platforms that you can imagine. And I really admire that and hope that we can someday do the same thing with Community Church and with our Sunday morning message. David ROVICS.
Hello,
From Portland,
Dean,
Oregon.
everybody.
So glad that you're with us.
So glad to be with you all, and I'm also very happy to give technical advice to anybody interested in broadcasting on multiple platforms and making a guitar sound good on a live stream broadcast. And it's where things are at these days. And I'm usually broadcasting interviews with various folks, actually most weekdays at 10 a.m. Pacific on my Facebook and lots of other platforms. And and the trick to making a guitar sound good on Zoom is you disable all the compression. And I wrote a song about it, but I won't do that song. I'll do a different song. Jacob Blake was walking to his SUV. Alton Sterling was selling DVDs. Eric Garner had just broken up a fight. Breonna Taylor was asleep in the middle of the night. Tamir Rice was playing in the park. Elijah McClain was out walking after dark. Dominique Clayton was sleeping in her bed when she was shot by a cop in the back of her head. Say their names. Say their names. Say their names. Say their names. Walter Scott was driving to a store. Betty Jones was answering her door. Philando Castile was driving home with his girlfriend. Anthony Hill was naked on the grass when he met his end. Edsel Ford was walking in his neighborhood. Michael Brown was blown away just standing where he stood. Kendra James was shot to death at a traffic stop by yet another unaccountable killer cop. Say their names. Say their names. Say their names. Say their names. Tatiana Jefferson was playing a video game with her little nephew. Gunned down just the same. Oscar Grant was celebrating the new year. Handcuffed when the shots rang out that everyone could hear. Eric Reason pulled into a parking spot. Not long after that was when he was shot. George Floyd was just shopping in a store. Micah Xavier Johnson thought he was still at war. Say their names. Say their names. Say their names. Say their names. Say their names.
We say their names, and we light this candle for them. It's a tiny little candle, and it's a still small voice. But we will rise and we will fight this injustice. Thank you, David, for that song. It's just a beautiful, moving song. I was running around the auditorium of Community Church, trying to find, to augment to David's message, a beautiful poster that Crystal Rollins Jackson, our publications manager, designed, and it's called Say Their Names. It has her drawing and painting of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd at the top, and it's a list of names, too long a list of names. We made a huge sandwich board poster out of it, and it was in front on the sidewalk of our normally busy street on Boylston Street for several months. And it's a beautiful tribute, as is your tribute, David ROVICS. Thank you for joining us this morning. We look forward to more songs during this church meeting of Community Church.
Thank you.
I want to show you this as well. That is a artwork of Bennett Hammond, luminary in the folk world of the city of Boston. He and his wife Lorraine just are incredible community builders for this assemblage of musicians and performers in the city of Boston. And we will soon have that on a black t-shirt. And on the back will be a beautiful pencil drawing of Community Church's 5-story building on Boylston Street. And on the side will be words about our 100th anniversary, which is this year. It'll be a beautiful T-shirt, and I hope you will all buy one and wear it proudly. We are celebrating our 100th anniversary, and we will not be detained by no COVID nonsense. We are celebrating the founders of this church who in 1920 came together and started just a beautiful experiment. I want to read the words of our founder. His name was Reverend Clarence Skinner. 1920, as part of a movement among Universalist churches, the community church was founded and started as an attempt to add social change to religion and worship. It was a reaction in many ways to World War I war profiteering, and a reaction to what was going on in the world of labor. And the very first session that's listed on our record of meetings was a Sacco and Vanzetti benefit supper in a ballroom of a big hotel. Anyway, these are words from Clarence Skinner. Out of the world's wide ways we come to this, our house of fellowship and aspiration. Here may the evils which beset us be banished by the power of justice, the fears that haunt us be overcome by fresh insight, the doubts that drive us be dissolved into finer faith. Here, each in our own way, yet together, let us for a brief time look into the mysteries of life's beginning, the source out of which the endless eons roll and countless lives emerge, and with renewed hope, search through this maddening maze of things to find again life's aims and meaning, and above all, its glory. Clarence Skinner. Good morning, everybody. There's 15 of us on the Zoom, and probably another 15 of us on the YouTube Live. We're so glad this morning that you're with us in this before math of Thanksgiving and National Day of Mourning. I've heard that in Plymouth there will actually be a National Day of Mourning celebrated, organized by the Native tribes and by the New England Association of Tribes. I don't know all the details. I haven't looked on the website, but they're actually going to meet, and it's usually an outdoor event. It's a commemoration and an observance in the form of a march. Usually they go to some kind of a hall and have a big feast. Maybe they're dispensing with that part of it, but look into that as an alternative for your postponed Thanksgiving family gathering plans. So here we are, Community Church, in our lonely, empty auditorium. I want to tell you that we will have. I'm down here just about every day, and if by chance you would like to come down and by special appointment do some holiday shopping, I can tell you what we can offer. The first is coffee from a village called Isotalillo. It's in El Salvador, and it's the same coffee that I shamelessly peddle at Farmers Market. Yesterday, I had a banner day at the Roslindale Farmers Market because it was the last one, and people were stocking up for their winter and for their holiday gifts. And you can come to Community Church and get your pound or your 10 pounds. There's also ways to have it shipped to you if you live far away. You can be in touch with me, Dean at deanstevens.com, and I will send you coffee. It's completely a benefit for for that village, Isotalillo. 70 people live there. Mostly don't know how to read and write, but there is one outstanding student who is the object of most of the proceeds of these coffee sales. She is in university, and she's the first person in that village who graduated high school, and just driven, and is getting very good marks, and is in her final year of studying education at university. And she is scholarshiped by these coffee sales. There's also a ton of crafts from another village called Teocinte, also El Salvador. And I'll show you a couple. I've not been allowed to sell crafts at the farmer's market. They want just food. But if you want to come by personal appointment to community church, you can get something like a beautiful backpack, Guatemalan backstrap woven cloth, sewn in Teocinte, a women's co-op, six women who have become just very, very skilled tailors in the years that we've been visiting and having a friendship with them. Here's a little laptop case. Beautiful things. I'll find some, a yoga mat carrier. It's got a little shoulder strap. It's got a little pocket to put your wallet and your keys in while you're doing your yoga. Let's see what else we got. We got a book bag, with a strap. The strap. I could go on and on, but I won't, because we have a beautiful meeting of people here. And let's see, any other announcements? Just tell you that if you would like to be added to Community Church's e-list, you can do several things. You can give us your email address in the chat section. You can also email us at comchurch@gmail.com, comchurch, C-O-M-M, church@gmail.com, and we will add you to our list. We have a bunch of great stuff coming up in December. December 6th, Reverend June Cooper from City Mission. She runs a ministry that is basically out of the Boston Common. A lot of it is to homeless people. And she will be joining us December 6th. December 13th, Daniel Ellsberg will receive our annual Sacco and Vanzetti Award. December 20th, Chris Hedges will join us. It's just like such a embarrassment of riches, such a feast of excellence that we start our month of December with. Later in the month will be a live virtual concert from this very auditorium. Bennett and Lorraine Hammond and Dean Stevens will do a solstice event for you, as we have done many in past years. We just decided to take that on. Let's see. I see that Susan has her hand up. Susan, hi. Welcome.
Hello.
This is announcements or just comments?
Yes.
Hi, Susan.
Yeah, an announcement. I'll be very brief. The Day of Mourning commemoration will be live streamed this year. So I don't know if they have the information on their website yet. I'll put the website into the chat. So from your homes, you can participate in that.
Thank you, Susan. Susan Nye, my fellow traveler to El Salvador and fellow cohort from the Watertown, El Salvador Sister City Committee, as well as activist on tireless activist on matters of Palestine. Are there any other announcements about upcoming events that folks might have, or commentaries on the nature of things? Oh boy, that's an invitation, isn't it? 3 minutes or less. David, I think you are unmuted. Dave Lewitt, good morning.
Yes, good morning. Ignacio Castuera is preaching in Los Angeles. That would be 2 o'clock Eastern time on our outgoing president and the future of that, and on Biden, who is a Catholic and has met the Pope. And so Ignacio has a number of comments to make about the near future there. I think you can reach it at uula.org. I don't know, Dean, whether you have the email that I sent you about that in front of you, but
I will look for it and I will put the link up in a chat section.
very good. Thank you.
Reverend Ignacio Castuera, who has spoken here numerous times, wonderful theologian and minister. Check him out at 2 p.m. uula.org, or if it's a different link, I will add it to the chat as soon as I get a chance. So let's just go back to David and hear a couple tunes. David, are you ready for us?
Absolutely. And I've been thinking about what Norm might be talking about, which not surprisingly coincides very neatly with some songs I've written recently. And I was thinking about all those people who I keep on hearing about, from nurses who are, talking on radio shows about how the last words of their patient was, but this virus isn't real, or the virus is a hoax, or but I thought the virus was a hoax, or I wish I was wearing my mask. And then, why do all these people not believe what the media tells them? They lied about the wars, took time to figure out that democracy and freedom was not what it was about. They said we'd fight the terrorists, but all that I could see was I was occupying someone else's country. They lied about the weapons. They all were so convinced. The generals on the TV, haven't heard from them since. They say it was an accident, but I think it was their plan. They spread the lie on CNN and NPR and C-SPAN. They lied about the jobs all the pundits used to say before the city was abandoned and the good ones went away. Sign up to this free trade bill, win-win all around. Now half the guys I know, used to know, are 6 feet underground. Lying is all they seem to do. Looking at us on TV, they pretend they care, but it's all about the money, which anyone can tell if you have half a brain. Why I should believe them now, it just seems insane. Talk turned to the virus, what we all stood to lose. I was not the only one who thought it was fake news. I just went about my life like I normally would do. So maybe I'll catch a cold, I thought, or a little flu. They lie about so much, I wish it were not true. But from this hospital bed, if I could just click undo, I guess I would have worn a mask, stayed home to quarantine, instead of being intubated, hooked up to this machine. You can say that I'm an idiot, maybe, I don't know. But before I take my leave, before I have to go, before they stick me in a box with quarters on my eyes, there's lots of blame to go around here, and I know where it lies. They lied about the wars. There's some other mics that are not muted that I'm hearing, other than my music, if people want to maybe mute them. That is one of those things about Zoom. That's why I use StreamYard. But you can hear me, right? I'm not coming up for myself on the screen, but I don't appear to be muted, so that's good. So I guess everybody can hear. Okay, good. So, yeah. Oh, now I remember what I was going to do. Those things. Zoom. That's why I use StreamYard. So, the person who's in control here, you can mute everybody else if you. There's a way you can do that, but right now, other people are coming up on the screen. Am I okay? Now I'm unmuted now, right? Okay, good. I'm still not on the screen, but not on my screen, but let's see. So this is the day of mourning and coming up, and I think it was the first time I ever got tear gassed. Actually, I can't remember what year that was now, but it was the Pilgrim Progress. Oh, there I am. The Pilgrim Progress Parade was going on, and in Plymouth Rock, back when I lived in Boston, which I did for many, many years, and I went to the counter protest of the Pilgrim Progress Parade. And we were met by just astounding levels of police brutality. And the police there just arrested all of the organizers except for one who they, I think, just didn't have on their list. But there was a police superintendent or whatever there, and he was pointing out everybody who should be arrested. And the cops were going around and arresting each one of the organizers. They took them all away, and then they took away all the organizers, so there was nobody left who even knew like what was going on, like where the next thing was that people were planning on doing. But and they were tear gassing all over the place. Here in Oregon, we just noted the passing of, or celebrate, or whatever. I don't know. So different people have probably different attitudes about it. But the 170th anniversary of the passing of the act that was the act that gave white settlers all the land here. This fertile valley was stolen, was a process assisted by an epidemic that wiped off the earth most any who might have resisted. The land that was parceled and given away to any brave pioneer who was white enough to own property around here. When this fertile valley was stolen, it sealed so many a fate who'd no longer live by a trading post, but in a stratified settler state, with a white landed gentry created by colonial decree. We're not talking about the Bible, but a few generations of history. When this fertile valley was stolen, it was easy to foresee that so many, many years later, there'd still be a white majority. It was engineered from the day the exclusion laws were made. Any pretense of inclusion since has been a sick charade. When this fertile valley was stolen, the pioneers were given their farms, which were defended from the displaced by force of arms. and by dint of reason as false as any that could be, enforced by laws and customs called white supremacy. When this fertile valley was stolen, a process was set forth to make another bastion of capitalism to the west and north of freshly conquered California, Arizona, and the rest of the disease and theft and slaughter when the pioneers went west. When this fertile valley was stolen, that's my contribution.
David ROVICS, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dean.
So great to hear you. So great to tune in to some of your broadcasts of.
You got muted somehow, Dean. Dean is muted.
Am
There
I
you go.
unmuted?
Oh, you're unmuted. You're unmuted.
It's so great to hear your songs and to tune into all your different kinds of broadcasts and learn about your pioneerings in the field of the virtual airwaves.
I'm definitely not pioneering, but I'm just well behind the pioneers. But
Yeah,
thank you.
the son of the pioneers. Yes.
A son of the pioneers.
Anyway, by virtue of, by way of introducing Norm, I've got to say that this auditorium, this lonely auditorium here, has sort of turned into a pretty sloppy office space for yours truly. And there's stuff laid out over all kinds of tables, and I've taken the advantage of not having to clean up for some upcoming event to just make a sort of a big mess, but which feels good because it's spacious if it's only one of you. But one of the things I've done is just I realized that I subscribe to too many magazines of the following kind. And I've brought them all down here in thoughts of maybe this being a good library for small media magazines. This is called Solutions, Rocky Mountain Institute, Green Energy. And I show you that just by way of telling you that we're about to transition from fossil fuel heat to electric heat, which is partially fossil fuel, but stands the possibility of being renewable or more renewable than oil. Against the Current, a socialist journal. I have a pile of these I brought down at Community Church. Socialist Standard. This started coming through us through Carla Rabb of blessed memory, who both she and her partner, Ron Elbert, were very active in the ISM, International Socialist Movement. There's a pile of those. I love this one, and I never have time to get around to it. Orion. It's kind of a thick environmental people and nature. There's also Grist, which I didn't bring. Endangered Earth, Center for Biological Diversity. I love that organization. Forest News. This is Forest Service Employees for Environmental Ethics. I love them too. Here's a local one. It's kind of more of a rag, but Jason Pramus is the editor. Dig Boston. It's been doing some really interesting articles on the local scene, and I hope that Jason will, and the rest of the staff here will be more involved with us in our attempt to become a platform for broadcast of what we do on Sundays and other days of the week. In these times, another just wonderful resource of amazing journalism. This, I think, is one of my very favorite that comes, and I have since become a subscriber. In fact, I get 2 copies for some reason I don't understand, but I should tell them I need not get 2 copies, but I bring one down to the church. This is called Washington Report on Middle East Affairs, and it's an amazing assemblage of reportage on Palestine, Israel, and nearby countries. This is just a terrific magazine. I can't say enough about it. Subscribe to Washington Report on Middle East Affairs. Sierra. I've heard some people bad-mouthing Sierra about being a corporate shills for blah, blah, blah. I'm a 40-year member of Sierra Club, and I don't care. NACLA, North American Committee on Latin America. Fabulous Latin America left are going to make it finally to community church to be archived if we have any room for it. Earth Island Journal. This is just a terrific, Earth Island Institute was David Brower's very last project before he passed. I think he was, how do they say it? One of the founders of Sierra Club, and it became too mainstream for him. And so he founded Friends of the Earth. That became too mainstream for him. So he founded another one. He finally ended up on this one. And if he were still with us, he'd probably have abandoned that one for something more radical. Earth Island Journal. UU World, Unitarian Universalists. That's sort of us, but maybe not. I don't know. We are in the Association of Unitarian Universalists, and we're listed as one of their 1,500 congregations. I don't think we look much like what a UU church is supposed to look like. We're pretty weird in that regard. But that's a whole pile that I wanted to show you. And the final one is one of my favorites as well, and it's called The Progressive. And because of my visits to Madison, Wisconsin, a couple times a year back in the days before there was a family and a mortgage, I always have loved The Progressive. I'll tell you a little story too. Matthew Rothschild used to be the editor of The Progressive, and he had, or The Progressive in that time had a serious benefactor. Her name was Cynthia Foster. Cynthia was a member of Community Church of Boston from the inception, maybe the mid-20s, all the way till she passed in 2005 or 6, I believe it was. In her last days, she made a pretty big chunk donation to The Progressive, and as a thank you, got a personal visit from Matthew Rothschild. And Cynthia Foster was getting on in her days and couldn't get around much, and she invited me to come down to Brockton, where she was living with her grandniece, and join her to receive Matthew Rothschild. And she turned it into this big ceremony where she would hail Mr. Rothschild up the stairs, and we would sing a song for him. It was a little bit part of age setting in to Cynthia. Anyway, long and short of it, we had a lovely visit with Matthew Rothschild of The Progressive, and went out to lunch with Cynthia and her grandniece and Matthew and me. And ever since then, Matthew has retired, and we have Norman Stockwell. And I know Norman from back when I would travel to Madison. He was at a station that was called WORT. That would be WORT. And I love their slogan back in that day. I don't think they have it anymore, but they called it Wisconsin's Derriere. You get it in all its forms, all the dairy in Wisconsin, and the dairy. the air for the radio. That was just so lovely and so clever. Norm Stockwell is no longer Wisconsin's derriere. he has risen from there to a more lofty position as editor at the Progressive magazine. Norm, we're really honored and grateful for your sharing this morning with us. And the floor is yours. Take it away. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. And really a pleasure to be with you here. I should note that I would have come in person to do this also, were it not for the times that we're living in. In fact, I had a ticket to come out to Boston last spring, which I had to forego because we couldn't travel anymore. But I would love to come and visit all of you out there at Community Church in some future time when we're able to travel again. As Dean noted, we know each other through music, and it was always great to have him come to Madison, Wisconsin to perform and also to showcase his very fine work on the community radio station there in Madison. Since that time, I have left the world of radio to move to the modern technology of print, and I am now the publisher of the Progressive magazine, which is based here in Madison. And I want to talk a little bit about independent media today. I'll start with a little bit from our editor, Bill Leaders, who just recently hosted an international group, again, virtually like everything else. But each year we have hosted journalists from different parts of the world. Last year, it was a group of journalists from many of the countries of Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union. This year, it was a group of journalists from Central and South America, and talking about the topic of journalism in the United States, how we practice it, and so on. And Bill Leaders wrote a little piece about this, which is up on our website. I'm just going to quote from it briefly. He was talking about the way that we all cover things, and they had said, well, in their country, it's much more difficult to cover political figures in the way that we do here in the United States. And he said, sadly, I told the visitors that the ability of U.S. journalists to tell the truth has been substantially diminished by the widespread erosion of regard for truth itself. Large numbers of Americans believe, based on zero evidence, that Democrats, the media, and the quote, deep state stole the election from Donald Trump, at the same time as they believe that the COVID-19 virus, which has killed 250,000 Americans, is a hoax. My message to the group, he writes, was that we face a common enemy, the preponderance of lies. We also share a common goal, to make truth matter. We as journalists should apply and teach the skills that we have honed, skepticism, empiricism, rationality, to the extent that we can, given the obstacles that we face. Our obstacles as journalists and opinion leaders is to insist that truth is knowable and deserves more fidelity than falsehoods. That is the torch that we must carry into the future. That was from a recent op-ed, actually, that Bill wrote, and it kind of lays the groundwork for where we are at the Progressive magazine. The Progressive magazine is 111 years old, so we started just shortly before Community Church, and in fact, some of our very earliest coverage was regular reporting on the arrest and trial of Sacco and Vanzetti. So I want to show a short video that one of our interns produced, and Charlie has the YouTube link queued up, so I'm going to ask him to to share the screen with this short video about the history of the Progressive magazine. As we get that queued up, again, this was prepared by one of our interns for the Progressive magazine. We have a regular internship program where we bring in students from mostly the Madison area, but actually all around the country. We've had students from New York and Massachusetts and so on. And we have a regular training program that we do for students. Charlie, do you have that video available?
Just 1 second now.
Okay. So it's a very short video, but he did a tremendous job of putting together clips from our history.
Okay.
It's ruining the country. When the union hears about this.
At the Progressive, we've always stood at the cutting edge of history.
It's so important we understand the power of movements because people are hungry for independent voices they can trust.
The readership of Progressive is very special readership. We're supposed to be able to question anything.
We started out as La Follette's Weekly in 1909 under the editor Belle La Follette and her husband, Senator Robert La Follette of Wisconsin, popularly known as Fighting Bob. We supported the movement for women's suffrage. We stood up against McCarthy. We beat back the government's attempt to censor a story that challenged nuclear secrecy. Our pages have been home to some of the most influential voices in American politics, fostering resistance and speaking up for the oppressed.
We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop.
And we carry this legacy forward into the present day.
The billions of dollars hemorrhaged at the top, but that's a moral disgrace. People before profit. They were capitalists. Don't flush, folks. It's nothing to be ashamed. America is not made in the making. It has today to meet an impending crisis, menacing as any in the nation's history.
So a little bit there about the history of the Progressive magazine. Again, we began in 1909. January 9th, 1909 was the first issue of the magazine. And the founder, Robert M. La Follette, who was a popular progressive governor and senator from Wisconsin, and his wife and lifelong partner in these projects, Belle Case La Follette, who was a prominent suffragist in the state of Wisconsin. And the role of the Progressive really at that time and still today is to do two things. One is to pull back the curtain on the corporate control of our political system, on the attacks on working people by corporate interests, and secondly, to showcase progressive movements, the grassroots movements for social change here in the United States. It's a grand tradition that the Progressive fits right in with so many other what we've come to know as muckraking journalists, people like Lincoln Steffens, Jacob Riis, who documented some of the early sweatshop conditions and child labor in the United States, Nellie Bly, who exposed the among other things, exposed the mental health institution that she snuck into and was able to write a report about that. Also, I think back to other progressive journalists of years past. Elijah Lovejoy, who was from Massachusetts but moved to Illinois, an abolitionist who had several of his printing presses destroyed for printing in the southern part of Illinois, printing articles opposing slavery. So that's the tradition that we rise out of, and it's a tradition that has continued in this country throughout the 20th century. We have the legacy of the anti-war press during the Vietnam War. We have more recently the indie media movement. David ROVICS and I know each other from many of the anti-globalization protests of the beginning with Seattle in 1999 and going through the early 2000s, people coming together to present alternative media because the corporate media was not telling the truth. And the story I like to tell about the beginning of the Seattle Independent Media Center on November 30th of 1999, the first day of the large protests in Seattle, the corporate media was putting out the press releases of the city of Seattle saying rubber bullets were not being used in Seattle, and independent media activists would go out and gather up handfuls of rubber bullets from the street, videotape them, and put them up on the internet and share them worldwide. And so on November 30th, the Indie Media website, a brand new idea that brought together audio, video, and print reporting from a group of independent activist journalists. The Indie Media website had more hits than CNN because they were actually giving reporting on what was going on in the streets of Seattle. Also, my own background in the world of community radio, which began in 1949 with a pacifist by the name of Lewis Hill, who started the first community radio station in Berkeley, California, and called it Pacifica Radio. Pacifica for the ocean, but also Pacifica for peace. And his notion, he came out of commercial radio, but his notion was that there needed to be a radio network that showcased the voices for peace, because all of the commercial media was beating the drum for war. And also the idea that there should be a way to do media that was not controlled by corporate interests, that was not dependent on advertising. And so he created the idea of listener-sponsored community radio, which is the model that was later adopted by NPR and public television, the idea of people supporting the content because they believed in it and because it gave them news and information that they couldn't get anywhere else. And we like to talk about it as the voice of the unrepresented or underrepresented sectors of our society. We used to have a t-shirt at WRT that talked about giving voice to the voiceless. And Pacifica Radio was one of the first radio networks to cover the war in Vietnam. In fact, they were the first radio network to have a reporter in North Vietnam during the Vietnam War, reporting back to the United States. They had people on the civil rights marches. They had people covering the Watergate hearings, the Iran-Contra hearings, and so on and so forth. This idea of independent media is critically important because so much of our media has been controlled by corporate interests. And, you know, in the United States, traditionally, media was not what we now call objective. You know, they teach you in the journalism schools this idea of objectivity, this idea of, you know, we have to have this balance. You have 99% of the climate scientists on one side say that humans are causing change in the atmosphere, and then you have this one scientist on the other side who says, "Oh, I disagree with that." And the media notion is that that's balance and objectivity. Well, historically, all of the different newspapers around the country had a voice and a side that they took, and you had the names of these papers still survive from that era. The Arizona Republican, the such and such Democrat. These papers had a voice that they spoke in, and most homes in the United States got several newspapers delivered each week, and we're able to read all of those different voices. Our own paper, the Progressive, originally it was called La Follette's Weekly, and I don't know if you can see the images there. This is some of our early issues. It was called La Follette's Weekly, but then we took the name The Progressive because of our voice representing progressive movements and progressive politics. But every home got, three or four newspapers delivered, and this was partly because there was a subsidy for the Postal Service to deliver these publications to people. It was one of the things that Ben Franklin advocated for when the post office was created in 1775, was this notion of being able to deliver these publications to people, to give people different ideas, different voices, that they could then make their own educated decisions. It made for a more informed electorate. And that's the role that independent media has continued to play today, whether it be the alternative press, like the press during the anti-Vietnam War movement, or community radio across the United States, giving voice to the unrepresented and underrepresented segments of our society. And oftentimes I do talks to college students, and I explain that, in many ways, this is a wonderful moment, because with the internet, we are able to get information so much more easily, and so much from so many different sources. And so you can read, Le Monde Diplomatique from Paris. You can read Der Spiegel from Germany. You can read all sorts of different papers from around the globe. And we, as consumers of media, really have a responsibility to do that, to take in all of these different voices and really form our own opinions about what's going on. But at the same time, it's a perilous time for media, because the world of social media, the Facebooks and Twitters and so on, have become used and weaponized by so many different right-wing and corporatist points of view. And so now your Facebook feed or your Twitter feed are filled with these commercial messages, and also filled with outright lies and misinformation, which are being circulated as a form of disinformation to really shake up our worldview. And that's what Bill was talking about in that op-ed that he wrote, that it's the preponderance of lies that really threatens both our democracy and also our ability to respond to this global health crisis that we're in the middle of right now. The idea that, again, and of course also, as I mentioned earlier, climate change, the idea of you have all of these scientific voices on one side providing information about the public health nature of this pandemic, and how mask wearing is a way to slow the spread of this disease. And then you have the people on the other side who are saying that it's an impingement on personal freedom, and those voices are amplified and magnified in social media. And so now, in the last several weeks, the last month or so, these social media platforms are scrambling to try and respond to that. And the result has been that they're actually stifling alternative voices. And so, for instance, in our case at The Progressive, we can no longer promote articles on Facebook because it's considered political speech, and Facebook currently has a ban on political advertising in the wake of the elections. So it's a very dangerous and difficult time for alternative media. Plus, the right-wing media has long been funded by some very deep pockets. This crusade against scientific information about climate change goes back to the late 1980s and is funded by major players like the Koch brothers, now Koch brother, whose money comes from the fossil fuel industry. And so it's in their interests to promote this uncertainty about climate science. So it makes us in the independent media world all the more it makes it all the more necessary for us to reach out through as many channels as we can to provide people with information, with truthful, fact-based analysis. And that's what we do at The Progressive. We come out as a bi-monthly magazine, but we also have daily content on the web at progressive.org. And those stories are rigorously fact-checked. Every article is read by 5 or 6 different people, and everything that's printed in the magazine and everything that's posted on the web is backed up with links, and they're links to source material, original source material. So if we write about something and it mentions a bill in Congress, we don't just put up a link to what some blogger is saying about the bill in Congress. We actually have the link to the original bill so that you can read it for yourself and be an educated consumer of the media. One other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit, because the pandemic has really hampered a lot of what we do in the independent media world, and that's because a lot of independent media, whether it's in a community radio newsroom or whether it's at a publication like ours, is created by having lots of people coming together, lots of heads, lots of different opinions, and we sit around and talk with each other and so on. And that's, of course, become much more difficult as we've moved into this world of virtual communication. But the difference between a blogger sitting in their basement typing away on the computer and writing whatever they think about, and having the cross-fertilization that goes on in a community radio newsroom, where people are able to talk to each other and share ideas and become exposed to new ways of thinking. So it's very sad, I think, that that we've been forced into this kind of isolation where the only way we can communicate is through these virtual conversations. And yet all of us are doing the best we can. And David alluded to that right at the very beginning about how we are using these tools and technologies, most of which are owned by large corporations like Zoom, to be able to talk with each other now in ways like this that we haven't done before. In fact, coming out of the early days of indie media in the late 1990s, beginning with the, I tend to point to the Democratic Convention in Chicago of 1996 as being sort of the birthplace of the indie media movement as we know it, because there was a media space that was created there to cover that convention, to provide people with real news of what was going on. And several people who had been involved in that ended up in Seattle at the Indie Media Center in 1999. But this notion of people coming together and providing this alternative view really involved an interaction and a conversation, but it also drew from this idea that comes out of Latin America, which is the notion of what they call globalization from below, taking the tools of corporate media like Zoom, like the internet, and taking them and using them to create a people's media. And that's what that's what we have done, both at the progressive and in the indie media and community radio movements, is taken these tools and democratized the production of media in a way that could not be done before. The fact that a radio program like Free Speech Radio News that was on the air for a decade or so in the first part of the 2000s could have the headlines produced in Oaxaca, Mexico, the engineering done in Berkeley, California, the reporters using things like portable mini disc recorders and internet uploads of MP3 files to share news from around the globe, gave us a way of really spreading out and democratizing the production of media that could not be done before. And it gave us a way of then doing what Jeremy Scahill and Amy Goodman have often referred to as going to the other end of the barrel of the gun of US foreign policy and giving voice to people in those situations. So instead of printing the press releases from the White House, as commercial media tends to do, we are able to go to the people that are affected by those policies and give voice to those people in a way that really technology has enabled us to be able to do that we could not do as easily before. When I worked in the 1980s as a journalist in Nicaragua during the Contra War, I was carrying around a big, giant, heavy cassette tape recorder and a couple of film cameras, and then to send that material back to the United States would cost a lot of money to send it by DHL, which was, I think, the only carrier that could get stuff out of Nicaragua because of the U.S. Trade embargo. So, it's a very different world now that we're able to report on the ground. And in fact, this whole notion of what people talk about now as citizen journalists came out of this indie media movement, because it's actually giving the cameras, the recording devices, and now your cell phone, which can, this little device that you can carry in your pocket can become a media production studio. You can look at the internet and give people real-time reporting from rallies, demonstrations, marches, or incidents of police violence, as you heard in the song that David sang right at the beginning of this program. That kind of news and information is readily available today, and it gives us a way of really giving voice to people who are affected by whether it be police brutality or US wars or the ravages of climate change, giving voice to those people and sharing that with a global audience. So I'm going to wrap up at this point, because I know we're going to do questions later, and I'd like to do that. But again, just to reiterate, I hope that you will check out the Progressive Magazine. It's a print magazine that comes out bi-monthly. And then also our website, progressive.org, which has content that's updated daily. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Norm. The Progressive, Norman Stockwell, editor. We'll talk more about the state of journalism and the state of information dissemination after our last song. But first, I want to hold up our collection basket. It's a beautiful basket I bought last year when there were holiday crafts markets. This year, that's going to be very, very much, you can't do them. You can't do them indoors, at least, and this is putting quite a damper on that holiday sales thing. Anyway, this is for Community Church. I have put in the chat our street address if you would like to send an old-fashioned check, which is how I transmit money to Community Church still, or our website where you can use PayPal or a credit card. David ROVICS, how about one last song? Thank you so much again.
Oh, thank you. This is wonderful. Gosh. It's yeah, and then of course, like, you know, in typical you know, modern internet fashion, while I'm listening to Norm's wonderful talk, I'm browsing the YouTube collection of other talks that have just been at the church. It's been a fantastic series of speakers just in the past few weeks. Here's a song I wrote. Well, it's based on a quote that I'm sure everybody's heard before, but it's been as the pandemic has been exposing the extreme inequities in society, it also gives rise to a lot of people imagining how things could be different. I've noticed. Like an old cloth torn and fraying, came like a clarion call to illustrate the saying, united we stand, divided we fall. A thin veneer torn by disease shredded the great con laid bare, came from across the seas, now floating in the air, like a corpse that's lying exposed, that all of us now can see. All that the cadaver shows about a society, the veil of fantasy lifted, that gives us at least some idea how another world is possible. And I can hear her breathing now. Like the red blood flows from the bullet, whether coated in rubber or not. Like the faces you see in the helmet, reflecting the thickening plot. Driven by such a villain, as a thing exponential allows, it says another world is possible. And I can hear her breathing now. Like the pallor on so many faces, on every end of the town, on the murals in so many places, boarded up and long ago shut down, making all the connections between the mule and the plow. Another world is possible, and I can hear her breathing now. Like the smoke rising up coast to coast, with formations that brighten the skies, like Lord Thomas Jefferson's ghost, his victims no longer disguised, as his visage falls into the river, like the skull of an old sacred cow. Another world is possible, and I can hear her breathing now. Another world is possible, and I can hear her breathing now.
David ROVICS is truly the people's troubadour for our age, a Woody Guthrie for our time. David ROVICS, long may you continue to inform us and delight us and instruct us. We send you virtual hugs and greetings to you and your family.
Thank you.
Thank you again for being here with this humble congregation. And we
pleasure.
just love your work and love your activist voice.
Very mutual. Thank you.
Norm, we're gonna do a little Q&A as best we can in this virtual community, and questions for David if desired. I'm going to go through the chat and see if there are any commentaries. Joan Livingston says, "Fighting Bob." We'd love to hear more about Bob La Follette from you. We're sort of, at least a few of us, very steeped in community churches' history of struggle and of being blacklisted in the 50s and of speaking out against all kinds of injustice, being on the forefront of voices as speakers like Martin Luther King, Thurgood Marshall spoke here, Henry Wallace spoke here, religious voices like Krishnamurti, the eastern side to religious practice in this country. Joan says, "Fighting Bob," and Joan also says, "DARPA developed social media." I don't know even what DARPA is. You have to remind me. "Heavy censorship of left and right pushes mushy middle establishment. They are corporations. Every Occupy had its own media." Joan says, "Can we be unmated just to clap after day?" Oh, she means unmuted, not unmated. Just to clap after David. We will do that at the end. We will unmute to clap for both David and Norm. And Joan says, "Long live and prosper." Tobias says, "Amazing performance. Thank you so much."
Dean, I'll speak to several of those points together here. The DARPA is it's the Defense Research Agency. I forget the exact acronym off the top of my head, but they were a large funder, also the CIA, of the early development of Facebook. That is correct. But I think that what we have seen in the past, probably 10 years, but certainly accelerated dramatically in the last 4 years, that the right has gone way beyond that and has weaponized Facebook and other social media. And now we're hearing rumors that Donald Trump, once he's out of office, wants to create his own media network, which will include, I'm sure, television, but also social media components, because that is his preferred way of communicating with people, as we all know, is banging things out on his Twitter feed. But these right-wing groups found that they can use the social media channels both as a tool of disinformation, but also as a platform for organizing and for gathering followers and adherents. And what happened beginning in 2016 was suddenly you had the organizing on social media broke out into real life physical organizing with things like the march in Charlottesville and so on. And these, that in 2017, of course, these gatherings of the right that were begun in the dark basements of social media and expanded into public gatherings when they were supported by mentions from the White House. And that was, of course, the beginning of what we're now seeing as these large anti-government, anti-good government protests in places like Michigan and Wisconsin, where right-wing militia groups actually plotted to kidnap the governor of Michigan because of lockdown orders around the coronavirus. And here in Wisconsin, the right has very effectively organized to block the governor's ability to provide public health restrictions to keep the spread of the virus. So all of these things coming together. Also, to Joan's point about the Occupy movement. The Occupy movement, which began in November of 2011 in New York, but really had in some ways inspiration, they said, from the protests here in Wisconsin 6 to 8 months earlier. The Occupy movement did include a number of independent media activists who had cut their teeth in the movements in Seattle and the various indie media centers that developed around the globe in the early 2000s. And people were doing that. They were making radio and making internet from the various Occupy sites around the country. And I think one thing that's really important to think about in terms of the Occupy movement, a lot of people said, "Oh, well, you know, Occupy just doesn't have a common demand." That was the mainstream media criticism. And of course, that was actually the essence of the Occupy movement, is that every single Occupy, whether it be New York or Los Angeles or Denver or Madison, Wisconsin, had certain kind of cohesive components, like a realization that the 99% were being basically robbed by the 1%, but also each movement in each city was tied to its own local issues. And so here in Madison, for instance, the Occupy movement developed into a tiny house building community that has created these tiny houses for homeless people. In other parts of the country, it addressed other issues, the local issues of racism and police brutality in different cities across the country, and so on. So the independent media efforts that developed around those Occupy movements were very important in communicating those ideas and issues. And finally, just briefly about Fighting Bob La Follette, I started by saying he was a popular governor and senator from Wisconsin. He was reelected to the US Senate several times, even though in the time of World War I, he spoke on the floor in opposition to the US entry in that war, because he was fiercely anti-militarist and anti-imperialist, and he felt that it was the boss's war that was sending the working people to fight overseas. And he was vilified, threatened as being pro-German during World War I. And even brought up for censure in the US Senate for his opposition to the First World War, and gave a very eloquent speech on the need of the people to have a voice in when the government is deciding to go to war. He was also a proponent of the direct election of senators, which used to be appointed by state legislatures, and now we elect our senators thanks to people like Fighting Bob La Follette. He ran for president on the Progressive Party ticket in 1924 and was, I think, third largest percentage-wise of votes for a third-party candidate in the history of the United States. but he passed away in 1925, and Belle Case La Follette, his wife and partner, took on the magazine and ran it until her death in 1931. And then their two sons, who also went into politics, and one became governor and one became senator, carried on that tradition. And then in the 1946, I think it was, Senate election, the younger La Follette was unseated by Joe McCarthy. And so that legacy, of course, carries on. And Joe McCarthy was fiercely opposed by our magazine in the 1950s. And the Progressive, along with people like Edward R. Murrow, worked to expose the lies of Joseph McCarthy, and ultimately were able to end the blacklist in the 1960s. Although the House Un-American Activities Committee continued until 1968, but McCarthy, of course, was dethroned with his Senate committee. So anyway, that's a little bit of that history, and would love to talk some more and take some more questions.
I have a question from one of the YouTube listeners. To just answer question, you mentioned the Chicago Convention and the media effort there. Was that the 68 convention, or I think you said 96?
Yeah, that was the 96 convention. And the 68 convention, of course, now is being particularly highlighted by the new film by Aaron Sorkin about the trial of the Chicago Seven. And probably everyone on this call remembers that it was really the Chicago Eight until Bobby Seale was separated, was gagged and chained in the courtroom, and then eventually separated from the defendants in what was declared a mistrial in his case. But the Aaron Sorkin film is showing on Netflix now, and I have to say it's got a number of shortcomings, because Aaron Sorkin sacrificed Hollywood drama for actual fact. There is another film which is more accurate and was created from the trial transcripts, and that's called Conspiracy: The Trial of the Chicago Eight. I was recently part of panel discussions on both those films. But in 1996, the Democrats held another convention in Chicago, and people decided that, unlike 68, where everyone was dependent on the mainstream media, the whole world is watching, the slogan of the Chicago 68 convention was about getting the mainstream media to carry the message of the protests. And people found out very quickly that that was not going to happen, and that in fact a lot of the media misportrayed what was going on. So in 96, people gathered and said, we're going to create an independent media center, although they didn't use those words yet, to get the word out about what's really going on in the streets of Chicago. And they were able to expose, among other things, the Chicago police had a building that they were using as a secret holding center for protesters that were being arrested and detained, and getting out the word about those protests, which were one of the first times that the government used this idea of a protest pen to contain free speech activity in a caged area off the site of the convention. That model, of course, developed in part with the Grenada invasion in 1983, when they started only allowing in journalists that were vetted by the U.S. government and embedded with the troops. And then that was used more fully in the Gulf War of 1991, and then later the Iraq and Afghanistan wars of 2001 and 2003. But this idea of an alternative media center was really, very, very prescient in the development of independent media, because it was also at a time when the internet and some of these technologies that I referred to, like portable mini disc recorders, were just being developed. And so it was a time when people were experimenting with these new technologies that really blossomed beginning in 1999 and going through the 2000s.
Can I, it seems like there was, from my experience, that, and I think of many people, 96, 99, the early 2000s was like a golden age for the internet when it was possible to use it as a organizing tool really successfully, and as and in terms of indie media and creating and collaborative and global media productions, and in terms of the global justice movement. And it seems like things took a massive nosedive somewhere around the time that Facebook was formed, and YouTube, and then later with other platforms that, like, at least in terms of independent journalism or independent music or any kind of independent art, as is documented, I think, really well in a recently published book called "The Death of the Artist" by Bill Deresiewicz here in Portland. I was really, I learned a lot from the book, because it wasn't, learned it wasn't just musicians that have been screwed by these corporations. It's just across the board in every form of sort of content production, creative arts or journalism or writing or anything, whether it's in music, it's Spotify, for writers, it's Amazon, it's different platforms that are these like vulture capitalist entities, like Uber, the way Uber destroyed the taxi industry. All these other corporations are going in for the kill, it seems, with everybody else. And I'm particularly familiar with what Spotify has done to independent music, but I'm sure that you've had a lot of experience with this in terms of print media and radio. And I wonder if you got any, like, in terms of the trajectory of the past like 20 years of the corporate attempts to sort of take over the internet and become the biggest corporations in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think we see this over and over again. I remember Utah Phillips had a great quote about the what happened to folk music, which began as people singing in their kitchens and living rooms and so on. And he talked about strip mining our culture and selling it back to us in the 1960s, what he calls the Great Folk Scare of the 1960s. Similarly, when cable TV first came out in the mid 70s, everyone on the left was saying, oh, it's so wonderful. Now we're going to have our own channel. And then what we ended up getting was, 500 channels of reruns of Gilligan's Island and the Shopping Network. Similarly, when satellite radio first came out, satellite radio in its early days had more diversity of ownership, particularly African American and Latinx ownership of radio stations than we had seen in decades in the United States, because of the consolidation of that media that had happened previously. And so these satellite radio stations early on represented a very diverse media and diverse voices, and that quickly was gobbled up by corporate consolidation. In the case of the internet, we had, as David says, I think sort of a golden age of using these technologies as things like the Independent Media Center developed Indie Media, INDYMEDIA.org. And then that was in many ways taken over. That space was taken over by things like Facebook. And, now so many people in the United States go to Facebook to get their news. And so instead of going to the news website of, any number of different organizations, people go to their news, what's called the news feed on Facebook, to see what the headlines are. And of course, those are promoted to you by various algorithms that are mostly about trying to sell you stuff. And so we have seen this constant cycle, I think, of corporate capitalism finding ways to take something that's initially a democratic media form and capturing it and strip mining our culture and selling it back to us. And certainly you see that in publishing. And I think Amazon is a classic example, and there have been some recent lawsuits about how Amazon has favored certain publishers over other publishers if they do certain things and follow certain practices. We've seen the same thing with Walmart doing that with consumer products, where if you want your items to sell in Walmart, you have to follow their particular guidelines and so on. So it's, I guess one would say it's a feature of capitalism and not of any particular media or platform.
I have a question, Norm, just about the Progressive. What's the size of your staff? How do you survive? What is your budget? What do your archives look like? That's a big one I have in my mind, because we have this 100-year of archives that have been neglected, and we're just looking at them now.
So I'll try to speak to all those different points. Our staff right now in the office, or not really in the office because we all meet virtually, but our local staff is 6 people. And then we have a part-time art director who's in New Jersey. We have a poetry editor who's in upstate New York. We have a couple of proofreaders in other parts of the country, but the editorial staff and the business staff of the magazine right now is 6 people. And that's, and it's the smallest that it's been in recent memory. And we did, we contracted quite a bit in response to the economic realities of being a print magazine in the 21st century. But everybody, I think, works very hard and enjoys doing what they're doing, and so none of us are sad about the workload. But we certainly, would love the collaboration with other people. Most of our writers are freelancers who are all over the country and some all over the globe. We have a writer in Guatemala who covers Central America for us. We have a writer in France, a writer in England. One of our writers is actually currently on an island off the coast of Portugal because he got trapped there by the coronavirus and hasn't returned to California. But anyway, so that's our current staff. We survive. About 50% of our income comes from subscription revenue, and about 50% comes from donations. And I should say subscription and subscription-related revenue, because one of the things we do is we have an archive of all of our articles going back to 1909 that's available digitally to libraries. We have library subscriptions and so on, and we also have advertising in the magazine, and not very much, but a little bit. And so that's about half of the income comes from the subscription related income, and the other half comes from donations from individuals all across the country, giving anywhere from $5 to $500. We have no great big endowment. We have no giant corporate sponsors. It's all surviving on these small donations of people that want to support the work that we do, and we solicit people for that regularly. We're actually mailing out something this week that invites people to donate to support this kind of work, because it is expensive. It's not cheap. It costs us about $50,000 for every issue of the magazine that we put out, and that includes printing, mailing, paying the artists, paying the writers, and so on. So it's it's no small task, and anybody that's out there that wants to keep this kind of independent journalism alive, I invite you to check out our website at progressive.org, which gives you the opportunity to support this work. I'll say one other thing about archives, which is we're very lucky to have here in Madison a wonderful historical society, which is the Wisconsin Historical Society, which is a huge repository of artifacts of the left, the anti-war movement, the Progressive Magazine, many, many other movements, and also some Hollywood film archives, the archives of Mark Blitzstein, the wonderful progressive composer of the 1930s and 40s, 50s. And so those things are archived. Our papers and history are archived at the Wisconsin State Historical Society.
Here's the envelope. I'm going to put this address in the chat.
Thank you so much.
This has a wonderful graphic on the front. It's summer drought. Our cash flow has dried up. Please help us get it going again. And I have just written a check, and I'm sticking it in this envelope. And you all can do the same along with your check to Community Church of Boston. Let's see. Jose Aleman says, independent journalism is necessary. Keep it up, keep it strong. I agree. And it's hard to keep up with so many different wonderful magazines, but when we have the editor-in-chief right in front of us talking to us, it really, I'm going to renew this subscription and make it come to 565 Boylston Street, which is Community Church's address. Maybe for our library collection of alternative media, print media here in our church building.
And we can provide you with some back issues of the last couple of years of our coverage of so many different issues and movements to add to that library as well.
Yeah, we're especially interested in Sacco and Vanzetti and the Rosenbergs. Those were two that figured prominently in Community Church's DNA, the defense of both of those. Let's see, I'm gonna, Charlie, another question from Charlie.
Well, this is my question for real, but I'm an occasional listener of mainly WBAI, but some of the other Pacifica stations. And there was that incident a couple of years ago where at least at WBAI, the board tried to sell the station. And I don't know how closely you follow that situation, or you can recommend information about the background of all that.
Yeah, I mean, I follow that very actively, and there have always been struggles in community radio, and particularly Pacifica radio stations, and they're always much more complex than they appear on the surface. But there's a number of very good internet websites for the different groups that are working to support the various stations in their efforts to continue to be independent and successful. And those two things don't always go hand in hand. It's been a difficult time for all alternative media projects, whether it be community radio stations or print publications like ours, or even independent internet websites. The idea of how do we survive when the right has seemingly unlimited resources from millionaires and billionaires who understand the idea of funding ideology, whereas on the left, the smaller pool of money is mostly going to support what I would call sort of soup bowls. That is, the funding agencies are looking for a quantifiable, how many kids did you feed today, or how many this, or how many that. And it's much more difficult to do kind of a long-term project, whereas the right is perfectly happy to throw a bunch of money at somebody to sit down and think about welfare for 10 years, as the Bradley Foundation did, and then come out with a plan which was first implemented in Wisconsin and then later picked up by the Clinton administration to, as they called it, reform welfare. So, you know, those kinds of hurdles for independent media projects, and community radio being one of those, have made it very difficult for organizations to survive and thrive in the long term. And I don't think, as I said during the talk, I don't think that social media is helping this at all. In fact, I think it's hindering it in a lot of really quantifiable ways. Similarly, Google, which controls, you know, between Google and Facebook, they control almost all the internet advertising revenue market nowadays. And so people think about, you know, the idea of, oh, you put up a website and you'll start, you know, raking in the money. Well, actually, you know, there's a lot of that money that goes through the hands of Google or Facebook before it ever gets to the individual producers. And Google is, you know, has been preferencing certain advertisers over others and things like that. And it makes that model of survival very difficult as well. All of us tend to go back to this idea of listener or reader support. You know, community radio surviving on the individual donations of listeners, most of them small donations. And in the journalism world, you have a lot of people that have set up their own, you know, pay-as-you-go kind of models, and we are similarly, you know, trying to survive on these donations from our readers and supporters who feel that this is information that they want and can't get anywhere else.
Question, how much is a subscription to your magazine?
So right now we have an introductory subscription rate of $15, which gets you a year's worth of the magazine. There's a subscription card in the paper magazine that Dean has in his hand there, but I'll type the code into the into the chat here if you want, and you can use that address that Dean just put into the chat, and you can use the this code right here, and you can get that $15 introductory rate. The cover price of the magazine is $5.95. It's sold in, and that's low in the magazine world nowadays. It's sold in newsstands and some grocery stores around the country. We had a big hit in our newsstand sales when all the Barnes and Noble stores closed and stopped taking magazines at the beginning of the pandemic, but some of that has come back. We also were able to get into the Kroger stores and some of the other grocery stores around the country. So, you know, we're trying to expand our newsstand market to make it available as single copies. You can also get a digital only subscription, which saves on paper for you and for us, and you can read it as an enhanced PDF with your digital subscription. So a lot of people choose that because then you can put it on your tablet and you can expand certain sections to read more easily and so on.
It seems to me we could, if some of us could give your magazine as a Christmas present.
Absolutely, and I'll say, since you mention it, the Progressive has a deal right now where, and the new issue will feature this on the cover. If you buy a gift subscription, you automatically get a free copy of our Hidden History of the United States calendar, which comes out every year. It's full of historical information and dates of when things happened, including things like the trial of Sacco and Vanzetti, the execution of the Rosenbergs, and so on in these pages. It also features covers from historical covers from the magazine, so you can see the kind of issues and topics that we've covered over the years. So when you buy a gift subscription for your friends, you also get a gift for yourself. So there you go.
So if I buy a few subscriptions, can I get a few of them, or how
You
does it-
can. And what you should actually do, I'm going to go ahead and put one other address into the chat here, because this is the address of our office, and you can all feel free to write to me there with questions, with comments, suggestions, after you get a chance to look at the magazine. If you haven't seen it in recent years, I'd love to hear what people think about the topics that we're covering and so on, and would love to hear from people anytime at that address. And you can also contact me about calendars and subscriptions and other questions like that.
Well, I just added a request for a calendar to my check. I want a copy of that calendar because it really could enhance what we do here. Every Sunday we talk about what happened during that week in the world of trying to change the world. We also do this occasional reading of this book, this Eduardo Galeano, Children of the Days, and it has a reading for every day of the week.
Right.
I want to read today's, just for fun. We're closing out here. If there's one more question after these final readings for David or for Norm, let's take them, Charlie, or you put them in the chat. Here's November 22. It's called Grandpa. I haven't read this even. It says, today in 1859, the first copy of Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species rolled off the presses. In the original manuscript, the book had another name. It was called Zoonomia, in homage to a work by Charles' grandfather, Erasmus Darwin. Erasmus had fathered 14 children and several books. 70 years ahead of his grandson, he warned that everything in nature that sprouts, crawls, walks, or flies has a common ancestor, and that common ancestor was not the hand of God. That's the reading for today from Eduardo Galeano. Do we have one last question by any chance, or comment, or musing, or rant, or rave?
Well, I'll take a second to mention that Eduardo Galeano was a regular contributor to the Progressive magazine also, and you can read some of his stuff on our website as well if you'd like more of his wonderful, wonderful words.
Joan, if you could unmute and have a question for us.
You are the host.
There you are, Joan.
Yes.
You're with us.
I have been
Hi,
for quite a
Joan.
while. I keep typing notes, but you read them like when the Lafayette had the old issues look astonishing. That's when I wrote Bob saying Bob. I have looked at the Progressive most recently, and it feels to me that Norman is a bit partisan. The most recent issue is about Biden's astonishingly progressive platform, and I don't believe that it is progressive. And in terms of censorship, you keep speaking about the right, but when Obama's last NDA was passed, that literally outlawed the reporting on, well, anything inconsistent with U.S. government narratives, but with an emphasis on Russia, Ukraine, the coup in, and Syria, the war of terror on Syria. And more recently, there has been a generic deplatforming, not just of the right. My friend and everyone's friend, Mickey Huff, who's at Project Censored, I kept, every time I see more censorship of the anti-war side, or what I define as progressive, which I happen to be an independent, so you can't blame anybody's words on me. And I like it, at least, that when you said the right, you then mentioned Clinton, because DLC, there seems to be like a free pass. The DLC people get away with unconstitutional wars. I can't count how many countries Obama, or continents Obama destroyed. And Amy Goodman, as an example, became NDAA compliant and began speaking for regime change in Nicaragua. And she was talking to the so-called rebels in Syria, the famous Twitter storm. Liberal interventionists shocked to discover the moderate rebels they've been supporting are actually terrorists, right? So Obama was a Democrat, but he was a damn good imperialist. And Biden has actually selected for an information manager, Stengel, who's also known from Time magazine, and he's bound to do more censorship. And he says he thinks that the First Amendment should be re-examined, which I think is not "quote unquote" progressive. I think that's regressive.
So I will say the progressive does not take any side in these political.
Anti-Trump, elect Biden. He's so progressive. That's
okay.
A side.
So I will respond to that. We don't take any partisan political side. In fact, we're a nonprofit. But what we do, and this goes back to the days of fighting Bob La Follette, is we will criticize when the politician should be criticized, and we will praise when they should be praised. La Follette was, in many cases, would support either Democrats or Republicans or progressives in the Senate if they were doing the right thing. In the case of the Democratic Party platform, it was pushed to the left by the people supporting more progressive issues, people like the supporters of Bernie Sanders. And so it did become a more progressive platform than it would have otherwise been. And I think that that does deserve some recognition. But more than that, if you look at most of our recent articles on the website, they're about progressive groups, Sunrise Movement, climate activists, activists working on criminal justice issues and police brutality issues and so on, talking about how it is our job as progressives to keep the pressure on this administration. Because certainly I think that, if we look historically at what both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have done when they were in the Senate, Kamala Harris, of course, still in the Senate for another several weeks, they have oftentimes taken positions that are not the most progressive choice. And so what we need is progressive activists like yourselves and others to push for that agenda, to push for healthcare, to push for better climate policy, to push for better criminal justice policy. And that really is going to be our role in the next 4 years and beyond, is to not do what so many people did after the election of Barack Obama in 2008, which is to sit back and say, oh, now everything is going to be fine. In fact, Barack Obama squandered his mandate and his first 100 days and all of the organization that went into making his 2008 victory possible was basically abandoned. And they could have, had it been a truly progressive-minded administration, they could have kept that network of supporters and activists alive and active, and instead that was kind of like all shoved under the rug. And you saw that with things like Van Jones getting kind of thrown under the bus early on. And Van Jones, no radical, but still, was approaching the environmental issue from a progressive point of view. So I think that that's our job at the Progressive and in progressive media, is to showcase these things that need to be addressed, these things where our elected representatives are falling short of what we elected them to do. And there was a great line in one of the, I think in the first or second issue of the magazine, Fighting Bob LaFollette, says, "This magazine recognizes as its chief task that of aiding in winning back for the people the complete power over government, national, state, and municipal, which has been lost to them by party machines and corporate and unincorporated monopolies. To the people whose interests it is our ambition to serve, we make the sole promise that so far as LaFollette's magazine can open it for you, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." And so that is our goal, our motto, and what we try to continue to do 111 plus years since that first issue.
I have a question. That's very worthy, and I wondered if you have come across different cities or towns that you feel exemplify people's showing more of people's control or more people power, and whether, if you have, whether that might be something that the magazine could cover in every issue, because I would hope there would be more than one. I think we need some examples of how that has happened and how it's running and what they're up against and how they deal with it, because that's inspiring. So I wonder if you could address that.
Yeah, and it is very much something that we cover in the pages of the magazine as well as on the website. You know, unfortunately, most of these movements are small and disparate, but things like community gardens in Chicago, things like the movements for the defunding of police in San Francisco and Portland, where David is from, in Seattle. You know, those are the kinds of examples of grassroots people's movements that we regularly cover in the magazine. And you'll see as you flip through the pages of it or look at our website, where you can read all these articles I'm talking about for free anytime, because we put up our content on the web for free for people because we feel it's important. But that's exactly what we try to do, is to showcase these grassroots movements and the victories when they occur. You know, there's a grand tradition in the United States of people's movements responding to corporate pressure, whether it be the farmers organizing in Kansas in the early 20th century or the late 19th century, or whether it be the civil rights movement, or whether it be the anti-war movement that opposed and eventually was able to make the war in Vietnam sufficiently uncomfortable for the business community that war was ended. You know, these are the kinds of things that we need to look to in our history as well as our present, in order to support each other in this work that we do.
All right. Thank you, Norm. Thank you, David. I want to remind everybody that next Sunday, Dr. Howard Ehrman will join us. He will be talking about all things pandemic and all things fighting the virus. Thank you, Charlie Welch, for making that recommendation. It promises to be a wonderful program. December, we have Dr. June Cooper. We have Daniel Ellsberg, who will join us from California, age 89, 90 or so. He will receive our Sacco and Vanzetti Award. We have Chris Hedges joining us on December 20th. That's just a start, and we have a solstice concert later in that month. I forget exactly what day it is. Again, there's while we're still on, there's a few things in the chat that you can find out about People's Music Network. There's links to David's different podcasts, and there's the address of the Progressive and the address of Community Church. Check those all out while I read us two poems to leave. I love singing this song and reading this poem at this time of the year. It's called Thanksgiving Eve by Bob Franke. It's so easy to dream of the days gone by. It's a hard thing to think of the times to come. But the grace to accept every moment as a gift is a gift that is given to some. What can you do with your days but work and hope? Let your dreams bind your work to your play. What can you do with each moment of your life but love till you've loved it away? Love till you've loved it away. And the other poem from Rumi. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. From the poet Rumi. The meeting is over, folks. Thanks. One last plug. By invitation only, we'll have a craft sale at Community Church. You can come here and you can pick up some of these beautiful things from the weavers of Sololá, Guatemala, named Maya Weavers, and from the sewers, seamstresses of Teocinte, El Salvador. Here's a coin purse, beautiful fall color brown. Here's a wallet. Here's another wallet. Here's what we call a clutch organizer. Very beautiful things. Here's a guitar strap. Sorry that Norm asked me, and this stuff is not on any website yet. Maybe someday if one of you will help me do that. And here's one final purse. Meeting at the building, soon be over, all over this world. Meeting at the building, soon be over, all over this world. Thanks to Zoom and YouTube. Meeting at the building, soon be over. Thank you to David and Norm, and thank you to all of you 17 participants and the other multitude on YouTube. We love you all. Will you join us again next Sunday or the one after, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, all over this world, all over this world, all over this world, from this lonely auditorium of Community Church of Boston. Thanks, everybody.
People should unmute themselves and clap.
Ciao.
One last clap. We're unmated and unmuted.
That was wonderful.
See y'all later.